Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Marching Arts Podcast, your guide to all things marching. James, I called you here today for us to
We are gathered here
really,
today.
really, really hash out the tough stuff.
Okay. Um,
As
left foot
we
or right
as we
foot?
just what?
Left foot or right foot?
No, it's left Twix or right Twix, bro. Come on, first episode.
No, what are you talking about? We haven't done that yet.
Yes, we have.
No, we haven't.
Remember we made our podcast about candy.
I tried to be whatever. I tried.
What? What did I miss?
Nothing. Continue on, charlatan.
We are here today to talk about some things that happen at camp and some people that you might have seen, and they are called techs.
Okay, but it's not just camp. It can be throughout the entire season as well.
I was going to get there. Techs are a lot of times used for camp, allow, section rehearsals, band rehearsal, drill rehearsal, music rehearsal, things like that to go smoother.
Okay, here's a quick.
But some techs, what?
No, I'm already gonna interrupt you here. But what's the difference between, I guess, a tech and a clinician?
Well, a tech is usually not someone
One-time
that
thing.
has is usually a one-time thing, or sometimes they don't return. A clinician has a lot more trust with the director and usually has a good relationship with that director. Um,
Well, I was gonna say
and is typically going to
clinicians.
be, and a clinician will typically stay a longer time than a tech will.
I've always had where my clinicians were just one and dones. They would show up for like
Interesting.
3 hours and lead the rehearsal and be like, here's an outside perspective of your program.
Oh,
Whereas techs,
interesting.
they usually stayed. Like we had one or two extra people for a camp, and then all the rest of the techs would stay for the rest of the season.
Hmm.
Well, I guess we agree to disagree.
I guess we're going to agree to disagree. It also just depends on what you call them.
Yeah.
But clinicians and techs are individuals that usually show up at your camp, at your band rehearsal, guard, drumline rehearsal, and they're usually geared for a specific purpose,
Right.
to help lead a specific part
Section.
of rehearsal.
Right.
So,
And then when we say tech, it definitely comes from the word technician. So I guess we just all like to shorten it down from technician to tech.
yeah. So, for example, you could have a drill tech, you could have a woodwind tech, a brass tech,
Visual tech.
fill in the section tech.
Right.
um, and something I wanted to talk about, which can go a lot of different directions, would be how do you become a tech? So I'll let you answer first.
Well, since I've never been one, I could be giving false information.
Okay. Well, I can. I mean, I can go
Um,
first if you want. I
I
didn't know you hadn't
guess
been a tech.
I guess we should also differentiate between like a tech and a staff member, because like staff members are usually hired by the actual school, and a tech is usually just given a stipend by the band program, right?
Well, it varies. So a staff member, you could argue, is also a tech.
Right. But
Um,
they're usually there for the entire year, usually, or they're employed
usually,
by the school system.
right. Or they can be, but sometimes those are how schools will do their technicians. Um, but
But then
more
once you
often than
consider
not, you are
them,
correct. But more often than not, you are correct.
but then at that point, wouldn't you just consider them staff if they're always expected to come? Or does
Yeah,
tech
I
can
mean that.
at any point just be like, nah, I'm good?
I mean, fair enough. Because with the staff, I guess the difference there would be a staff member, you sign a contract.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And tech, it's
um,
usually like, yeah, there is the contract, but it's more like, hey, I'll pay you $400 to show for 2 weeks.
or however long for
Right.
the season.
Um.
Um,
Okay, let me take an educated guess on about becoming a tech. That way you can correct me. So I can see three potential ways of becoming a tech. One, you were at your school, you were really good, and therefore the band director asked you to come back. Two, you work on your resume really well, and then if like say your school, your school doesn't need a tech, you can start putting out your resume to other schools, and maybe your band director will put in a good word for you. Number three, let's see. Your band director did put in a good word for you, or you have networking with friends who are say, hey, my band director is looking for a tech for this certain position. I think you'd be pretty good at it. I can put in a good word for you. And I guess the last one, I guess this is more specifically for DCI, would be you marched at in their corps for so many years. You were probably one of the top people in your horn line or whatever section, and they're like, we want you back to teach.
So all those are correct, right? There's a million different ways you could become a tech, but I'm going to focus on your networking answer.
Right.
Technicians are all about, or becoming a technician is all about being experienced in the art and being trustworthy to someone else. So it takes that networking and that communication in order to get a teching job. So typically, I would say, uh, I don't want to say standard practice because that's not accurate. But like a pretty regular occurring situation is when a say like a high schooler will graduate and had a good relationship with the band director.
Right.
The band director a lot of times will, like you said, reach out and ask that person to be a tech along with their, staff member or the clinician.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another way you can become a tech is that if you've teched around before, so like if you're an experienced tech, another way you can get a new teching job is
Right.
if you're credible enough, someone could just out of the blue message you to come be a tech for them.
Especially with band directors being so close, they're usually like, "Oh, I have a plethora of techs this year, but this guy's
Right.
looking for, or maybe this guy is moving, but the band director happens to know the band director in that part of town as well." And I guess to your
Right. And if
point,
you're
like usually a lot of people start with high school teching unless you march DCI, and then you move your way up into like more prestigious groups that way.
Well, becoming a DCI tech is really difficult
Right.
because anyone that wants to be a tech wants to be a DCI tech. It's not like that's
Right.
the
But
highest
usually,
level,
yeah,
right?
usually has
Maybe
a
they don't want to be, I don't want to speak for people, but
right.
you know,
Usually those are like
flex.
invitation only. Yeah.
Correct. So those are very difficult to get, and you need to be very,
Basically the best of the
very,
best.
very, very best of the best if you want to get a DCI teching job. Unless you again have great networking and you're just very very good history with that program or anything like that or the director. Um,
I mean, there's also instances of people that can move up that like helps their like high school program. Let's say like you're a guard tech and then you help your high school guard program and that like regularly does well at competitions, and then they ask you to tech for their winter guard, and then their winter guard like starts moving up in like WGI classes, and then an official WGI group might come to you and be like, "Wait, we've seen your results with these groups. Maybe we can have you help out and see how that goes as well."
and that ties back into the being very credible and best of the best.
Right.
Because if you're driving those results and your group is doing really well, you might get eyes on you
Mm.
because you may not think about it. People that compete in these competitions, you may not think about it, but a lot of groups watch these. A
Yeah.
lot of directors keep up with them.
As I say, a lot of directors and like staff members will just huddle at competitions anyways and just shoot the stuff
Yeah.
and talk.
But to answer that question, there are a lot of different ways you can be a tech. Otherwise, it might sometimes it's just out of sheer luck. You just
Yeah,
you're
that's true.
looking. Someone says, "Hey, my band's looking for techs. If anyone need if anyone's interested in being a tech,"
Right.
and then you just throw your name in there, and they're like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah.
We talked on this second question. We already answered this one a little bit, but we can go back into there. What are all the technician positions out there? Really, if you just put a name in front of it and add the word technician, that's a
Right.
position.
Yeah.
Like clarinet tech, flute tech, um, whatever it is, trombone tech.
I will say,
Um,
like, there's a lot of techs out there that might be like the woodwind or brass tech, but they may only have played like the reed instruments in the woodwind tech section, so like they don't have much experience with the flutes and piccolos. But it's like, well, that's all our program can afford, so you're just in charge of all the woodwind. So there are definitely people that have like minimal experience with some sections part of their like total group, but you know, it's what needs to be done.
no, absolutely. That was my experience because, I mean, you know me well.
Hmm.
I'm big brass guy. So for me, trying to teach a woodwind section is abysmal.
Right.
I can. So my thing, if I have to teach woodwinds, it's more so of the visual aspect,
Right.
and overall, like general music. Um, but as far as getting technical with the instrument, they're gonna know it better than I do.
Yeah.
um, because they're gonna know their horn better than I do.
Hmm.
But as far as brass goes, I will battle somebody on brass.
And
um,
then, like, just to say that, I guess we should always preface, like, just because you might be really good at what you are applying, you are really good at doing what you're applying for, but that doesn't mean you are good at teaching what you are applying
absolutely,
for. So just always be
absolutely.
cognizant of that as well. Because there
Sorry
are
for the
some,
people in the back.
right, because there might be some really great marchers, but then they're just like, oh, I just do it. And you're like, well, how does that help the new people that are helping? Or you might be really technically not challenged, technically skillful on your instrument, but if you're like, oh yeah, you just do it, that doesn't really help people. So you really have to
Right.
also know your ability to teach in a, I guess most of the times it'll be high school level.
Right. And another thing to since we're kind of on that topic, a really important thing to remember as a technician or someone that's wanting to be a technician,
Mm,
um, you have to listen to your kids.
yeah.
Because what you did at one school most likely may not work at at the school you're at. It might
Right.
be totally different. I mean, you got to be flexible with your teaching style. Think about what the goal of the band is. Keep that in mind as you're teaching, and then apply that to the section.
Mm,
Don't take it as what do I want this section to be. You need to take it as what does the band need this section to be,
right. And you're always going to have
and
that
that'll help
little bit
that.
of a push and pull with the director as well, because maybe the director is like, okay, maybe in 5 years we'll start to try to compete in DCI type competitions, but
Right.
the kids are not not to say they're bad, but it's like the program just
Or
isn't
they're
in a
not ready for it.
DCI set. So like the band director might be like, no, we need to start running practices like a DCI program. Why do I keep saying DCA? BOA program. Um, BOA program style, but then you also have to take into consideration like, well, you want to keep the kids happy. Well, not if not happy, but like in that sweet spot of like something challenging, but also not boring, but also not something they hate.
Right, you have to read the group and accommodate,
Right.
and it's a difficult thing. Teaching's hard.
Yeah.
Um,
And so speaking of teaching, but I do feel like there's a lot of techs that have or are in their music programs in college.
mhm.
So like if you are definitely a music major, I think that will definitely give you a leg up because again, you did have to go through basic piano, you did have to go through music theory, you have to go through either woodwind tech or brass tech, especially in your first like 2 semesters if you start in the fall. So um, if you're a music major and you're interested, I think you definitely have a leg up over people who may not have that music,
Well,
maybe
I
not
want to.
background, but education.
Yeah, I would caution. I don't want to say caution. Wow. Let me strike that from the record. Um, I would say that favors more of the music education majors. Some
Mm.
performance individuals are not interested at all
Oh
in
yeah,
marching band. They don't
right.
want to teach it. They're not interested. And those are the I would say to those individuals. I mean, hey, there's nothing wrong with it. We want to give it a shot, but come listen to us talk about it first before you jump into a band program.
Right. And this is again not to say people who don't have a music degree or is in the midst of a music degree can't be a tech. It's just that directors will sometimes be like, "Oh, let me see your, your credentials before, since you haven't
Absolutely.
teched before." So that's always something to look out.
Yeah, absolutely. But so one thing I also want to keep in mind, so there's technicians who are people that, they can reach out. Like, so let's go on to the situation of when I said, hey, my school is looking for a trombone tech, right?
Mm,
I'll use myself as an example, right? My school's looking for a trombone tech. Is anyone interested?
right.
And I see this post and I'm like, oh, great, cool, man. I love trombone. So best instrument ever. So let me,
Wah, wah.
I would love to teach some youngins.
Yeah.
So I reach out. Hey, I played trombone 4 years in high school. And I marched at the collegiate level. I'm interested in
Yeah.
being a
Name
tech
drop
for you.
that you
And
went to.
sometimes, and
Name drop.
sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah. Or name drop whatever program you went to. Yeah, I just
Correct.
happened to march at a Kennesaw Mountain. Yeah, we just won BOA like a couple times, no biggie.
No
Um,
biggie.
but yeah, like now that you mention it, there were a lot of times if you are in college marching band, and especially if you're in the leadership group
Hmm.
will be like, "Hey, I'm teching at so and so high school. They're looking for a woodwind tech. Is anybody interested?" And
Right.
they'll ask that general college leadership group before they ask other people. So,
It all about that networking and who you know.
ooh, you said
Um,
the N word.
Hey, whoa, 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 whoa,
Whoa,
whoa,
whoa,
whoa,
whoa,
whoa.
whoa.
Somebody's gonna clip that and I'm gonna get in trouble. Please
Right.
don't get me in trouble.
But
um,
yeah, I guess the word itself is a meme at this point, networking, because I remember in high school, if it wasn't like, oh, these classes are gonna get you prepared for college, but also you need to start networking as much as possible. And you're like, bro, I haven't even taken a single college class yet. I understand networking in college because, like, yeah, that's where you want to start seeing what industries or fields you want to go into. But at high school, when they're
right.
throwing the network word around, you're like, this really doesn't apply to me unless you're like going into a trade school. But even then, or a vocational school, because even then, it's like you go and you either pass or fail the apprenticeship, and then you don't really need a network for that.
Yeah. And that brings up a good point too as well. If you're wanting to be a tech, and you're new to it, don't just assume you're gonna get a tech job.
Right.
Because to that point, if no one knows who you are,
Yeah.
it's like walking into a job saying, "Here, I'm here to start my new job," and they're like, "Who are you? What
And
are you
also,
doing
like,
here?"
since tech is a much more informal position, excuse me, the interview process is more informal as well. So there might not even
Right.
be like an interview process. So literally, if it comes down to one person who is like an acquaintance of the band director and one person who's 3 steps removed from the band director, and your resumes look pretty similar, they're probably gonna go with the person who is one
Who they
degree
know.
closer, right? So
Absolutely.
that's why
Absolutely.
networking is always important, because even if you are a couple degrees of separation, maybe your 1 degree of separation is their best friend. And they're like, well, I can take my best friend's input as well as I take my personal gut input.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways. And I I do want to caution you. You brought up friends in tech. I want to caution people to, if you and a friend are looking to tech, from teching at the same school. Um, because and the reason why I say that is
Mm-hmm.
because there is a professional distance. Again, if you're new to teching or being a staff member or teaching kids, um, there's a or even being this kind of applies to leadership as well. There's
Right.
a professional distance, that you should have between you and the people you're teaching. And what
Right.
I mean by a professional distance is if you're all buddy buddy with the kids you're teaching, and all nice, you're hearing their problems, being a counselor to them, and
Mm.
whatever. When you try to be assertive over something, or you try to break that to be like, okay, we gotta get down to business.
Right.
A lot of times they you're gonna lose that response. Now,
Right.
that's not true for every case, but
And it also depends
data
on like
should
the seriousness of the program as well.
right. Um, but data shows it's just not something that happens often where if you act one way and then change, that the group's going to follow that change.
Yeah.
Um, so keep that professional distance. Sure, be involved. Be involved in the day to day with your kids. You can talk about their personal life, um, but try to don't give everything about yourself. Don't be like, oh, let's go get Taco Mac or
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. Like, there's a lot of people that again might graduate, and their band director says, "I want you to come back and tech for me over the summer." But
and you
again,
might know a lot of the
yeah,
people
you're
there.
gonna probably be a lot of friends with your junior going into senior year people. But again, you have to sort of now be like, I'm an adult now. I need to act as an adult and not as one of their peers. And so maybe you do need to keep that professional distance of like saying, okay, I will always just hang out with the techs when it's like break time, or I'll always hang out with the staff when it's the break times, and not so much with the kids, because now essentially you are an adult.
Correct. Absolutely. So that's one thing I would say that as a rising tech you could do to distinguish yourself would be able to understand your version of a professional distance. And trust me, the band director will tell you if you do not have a professional distance because it's a
Absolutely.
problem for their program.
Right.
Because that also that looks bad on you as a tech.
Right.
Because if you're being buddy buddy with the kids, and the director asks you to do something
Mm.
that needs to happen with that section, they don't. Sometimes they don't. I mean, if I was in a director in that shoes, in those shoes, I don't know if I'd be able to trust a technician to get the job done.
Right. And then also just thinking broadly, you could also be cutting off a ton of people from that job opportunity in the future, because the band director will be like, okay, I tried hiring a kid who had just graduated from my program that
Mm-hmm.
one time. It didn't go great. I'm not going to do that again. And so now think
Right.
about the next couple of years that may not ever happen. And then there's people that are going to have a harder time getting into the field if they want to.
Absolutely, and that's a good point. So incoming techs, people interested in wanting to be a technician, um, no professional distance.
Yeah. And I will say,
That's
like,
going to really distinguish you.
the first year is very much so, or maybe not even first year, but your first experience will make it or break it for you and for your career. So for you, if you want to keep doing it, great. If you don't want to keep doing it, great. But like if you do a piss poor job of it that first time, that band director is never going to recommend you to anybody. And you can sort of try to leave it off your resume. But I'm sure word gets around and somebody might know you at a new program that you might apply to, either in the sense that you might put them down as a reference, or let's say one of your techs or one of your co-techs moved on to a different school and they're like, oh, I know that name, don't hire them.
Right. You have to put in a good word. You have to be your own advocate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna being successful your first time out is gonna be a really good boost to your networking.
Yeah.
And we're gonna say that word a lot. um, because if on the flip side of that, if you do really well on your first time out, techs
Mm-hmm.
that have been there for a long time will recommend you to other schools because
Right.
they've been around the block.
Mm-hmm.
So when people understand your teaching style and your professional distance with your kids, they're going to be able to know what program you're going to fit into.
Yeah.
And people do that subconsciously, right? That's not something, techs are standing around going, oh, well, you know, Billy over here teaches real stubborn and Sarah over there is super aloof,
Right.
right? They're not standing there analyzing that. They're going, "Oh, this went well, and they were really professional, and I think they'd be a great tech,"
Yeah.
or they didn't do great at X, Y, Z.
And if you're looking to move into more challenging, so like the more challenging a program is, usually the more rewarding it can be. It's not to say that if it's always more challenging, it's always going to be more rewarding, but usually you just need that more experience behind you. Um, where was I going with this, Harrison?
James, I don't know.
Let's see. At least we can
Because
edit it
you
in
were talking
post.
about it being rewarding. So are you going along the lines of
I guess I want to say yes, there are some programs out there that are just like, yeah, we all just want to have fun. We're not all trying to be hard asses. Um, but if you are looking for that more challenging technical fill your cup sort of thing, um, I don't know, man. I guess I'll just cut all this.
No, I think we can leave it. If you're, I mean, if you're looking to be more fulfilled and be in a program to win trophies, win awards, that's fun. That's cool and fun and all, but that also comes with a very high standard of work.
Right.
Whereas groups that are more trying to have fun and they're trying to grow, just because they're not going for trophies doesn't mean you're not going to have the same amount of work.
Yeah.
Right, because we mentioned it earlier about one in that 5-year plan of trying to be a BOA band.
Yeah.
Right, you have to break traditions years in advance. So I think everything you said was valid. I just think you couldn't find your conclusion.
Right. And again, like, I guess we're sort of spoiled because we're in Metro Atlanta in Georgia, which is a pretty competitive marching band scene. So there might be just entire states where it's just like, ooh, you're like tech for like a really, I guess some people might call it snobby if like you're trying really hard to win trophies and whatnot, because like marching band might not be seen as like we they won't put it on as high as a pedestal as some states do. So again, just know the culture that you're in,
Absolutely.
because there are some places where um like you might hear about a tech job, but it's like 50 miles out from the culture that you've grown up in. And in Georgia, 50 miles out from Metro Atlanta could get you in the boondocks. So always do your research as well.
Absolutely. Look at the school's history. Try to figure something out about the school before you say, "Yeah, I'll tech
Yeah.
for you."
Hopefully there's something on YouTube at this point about their program.
Right. Hopefully. Um, but other things that I would say would distinguish someone as a tech, um, would probably be their timeliness and communication.
Yeah. Those will be the
Uh,
first things as an adult. It's basically a job. And if you've never had a job before, which I was one of those people that didn't have a job until I was until I was out of college. But again, like if you're late to practice as a kid, like the worst thing that's gonna happen is like you had to run laps. You're late to your job multiple times, you could get
you get
fired.
fired. Yeah.
Um, or you
You don't
just
get
don't
to
ever
come back.
you don't get recommendations. Like your career
Mhm.
just goes right down in the toilet. So, if you're 18 and you're first time fresh tech out there, you really will learn that difference of like, oh, this is a job versus this is a fun time I'm doing in my spare time.
Correct. And that's where, again, going back to the professional distance thing, you are a professional. You
Mm,
are in charge of whatever you are in charge of. And you have to take that seriously because that's your job. If you don't
right.
do your job, you get fired.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Now, some of the people that listen to this and be like, "Well, I had a tech that didn't do anything," and blah 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 blah. But you don't know how they were behind the scenes.
Right.
Sometimes people will do things that aren't necessarily in their section that give them job security. But we would, you would hope that a tech gets hired for their passion to teach that particular
Right.
area.
And again, since we are talking about jobs, that also means we have to talk about job politics.
Oh boy.
And we know if you never held a job before, no matter what job you will ever hold, there will be cliques, just like in school.
Hmm.
And that may not be because of the culture, but that's just how sort of humans work. Like I have more in common with this person, so I will hang out more with this person. But in the job or in the work industry, I don't know what to call it. In the
The
adult world,
workforce.
yeah, in the workforce, that has implications on you getting a job or you not getting a job, getting a promotion, being recommended, getting another contract, yada yada yada. So, um, just again, be professional, but also like if it's a really clean cut program and they always put professionalism and results above everything else, then you really don't have to worry about it because people are always going to respect you. Maybe you might not have the same teaching style, you may not have the same hobbies, you know, you may not have the same personalities, so you don't click as well. But they're like, they get the job done, we get consistent results. I don't care if we're not best friends. You know, they're good for this program, and keeping them is what's best for the program. But again, there are going to be those people out there that are like, oh, actually, I prefer somebody I'd rather be friends with in this job. And there's, and if they're in a higher position, then you can't really do anything about that. Obviously, just do the job to your best of your ability.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's always going to be people that you click more with, anyways, in that program. So maybe even if you don't click with that director, let's say the director, you don't click with the director, they hired you as a favor to somebody else, or not favor, but as a recommendation for somebody else. But you and the director just don't see eye to eye, even though you're getting the results. But you can clearly tell you're probably not going to come back that next year because the director just didn't like you for a reason. Hopefully, you have found somebody else in that program that likes you, that you can rely on, that says, hey, unfortunately, we won't be able to bring you back to this program, but I will try my darnest to make sure you find a spot somewhere else because you were that professional and you were able to
Correct.
separate the feelings from the results.
Correct. And as a technician, you got to take pride in that, right? If
Yeah.
if they're willing to help you out to find a new spot, that means you did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Um, it just may have been that you just weren't right for that school for that spot. But it doesn't mean you were bad at it. It just means that you weren't what they needed.
Mm,
Remember what I said earlier. You need to think about what the band needs when you teach, rather than what do you want a section to look like.
right.
You have to think about what the band needs. You have to put the band first, which is why you need to keep distance, that professional distance from your kids.
And I think just teching, if it is, especially your first job, I think it'll be a really good work experience as well. Just from you will literally have to teach tens, if not hundreds, of kids, and you'll be interacting with lots of strangers. You'll be asked to do things you never thought you'd be doing, like calling places, making sure things are getting done. You are like
Mm-hmm.
the sole responsibility for this big money item. Because teching is not just about teaching. They might be like, hey, somebody isn't here to drive the instrument car or whatever. So we need somebody to do that.
Can you help us do that?
Right.
Yeah.
So there's stuff like that. Obviously, if you're not hired by the school, you'll never be like, oh, can you please transport the kids, or can you be like, um,
Right.
unless you're like a chaperone, because that's always a volunteer type thing. But um, your responsibilities will grow, and you'll always be asked to do things that is not in your job description. Anybody who's ever worked a job knows what that's like, and it
Oh boy.
happens every single time at every single job. So don't ever expect that you
Mm-hmm.
will get a job that just sticks to the paperwork, unless you're in a union. But let's not get into that because I'm
It's a whole
people
nother
have,
thing, and I don't know much
right.
about them. So,
Um,
um, I do want to say that if someone is interested in being a technician, I personally highly recommend it.
mm,
Um, because you talked about bringing that into your professional life outside of just band,
right.
and it's incredibly useful. So if someone's looking to be like a lead, like a goal in their life is to be a leader in an organization or company,
Mm-hmm.
for their job, starting as a tech, 18 years old, just graduated high school,
Yeah.
it's a good start because you get to learn about yourself as a leader because you have to lead a group of people, but at the same time, you still have a fallback because you're only a technician. So if you need that help or you're just not understanding, the director's there to help you out. The staff member's there to help you out.
Right.
And so you're in a really neat spot where you get to learn how to teach, yet you're at pretty kind of a low risk, and you can take habits that you develop being a technician into the professional world.
And I will
Um,
say, you get to experience conflict management because
oh yeah.
always you're dealing with high schoolers. Let's be honest. But the good thing is that high school conflict management is much easier than adult conflict management, especially just in between the staff. Like staffs can get really splintered really badly.
Hmm.
at programs. And if you can imagine if that happens at a marching band program where they're, especially if they're only techs or they're like maybe the middle school band director who only comes and helps like, during marching band rehearsals 3 times or 2 times a week. Imagine what adult conflicts are like where you had to sit in an office with tens, hundreds of people, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So you will definitely get to learn conflict management, but it's much lower stakes than it is in the real world life or real world
Absolutely,
workforce.
and absolutely, but and at the same time, you're building that base, that foundation that you need to be a leader in an organization. So
Hmm.
even if you're fresh out of high school going into the college marching world, but you're not in your college leadership team, try to be a technician. You get to learn how to lead a group of individuals. You can
Right.
put that on a leadership resume at your college or university.
Hmm. And
Lots of advantages to being a tech.
and being a tech is helpful, yes, but again, it's how you translate it, how you take that experience and translate it to the future world. Because obviously, if you don't market yourself after you've finished your teching or you're currently in your teching, that can mean diddly squat for whatever you apply in the future. So, like,
Right.
I was never a tech, but I was leadership at the KSU marching band. So, it's not like you need it or anything. I mean, it's helpful, but again, it's not necessary. So there are other things you can do to be in leadership, and it's like you can get leadership skills in other ways. So don't feel like you have to be a tech
Right.
to join leadership in college.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, teching is not the only way to gain leadership experience.
Right.
Sorry, I guess the
Oh
way I
no, I
talked
didn't.
about it made it sound that way.
I just wanted to put that caveat in just in case people are like, "Oh no, I need to be a tech to join leadership." So
No, 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 you do not.
right,
Um, you do not have the title of a leader to
right.
actually be a leader.
And again, just because you're a really good leader doesn't mean you're going to be a really good tech, and just because you are a really good
Fair
tech does
enough.
not does not mean you're going to be a really good leader. Because
Nothing's
unfortunately,
guaranteed.
with the tech, you are explicitly in charge of people. With leadership, you are still part of the group, um, but you're not necessarily even above them. You are so more of their spokesperson. So
A good way to put it.
right. So again, like always do a self inward look at your mind and your soul to see what you actually really are good at. Because again, great techs and great leaders can usually go hand in hand, but that isn't always the case.
Yeah. And I feel like we've talked a lot about the high school level
Hmm.
of teching, but it varies depending on where you go.
Right.
On what level. So like at the high school level, you might, you'll be kind of working with people of all skill levels, whereas at a drum corps level, WGI indoor level, you're going to be working with experts,
Right.
and you have to be more of an expert than them.
Right.
And you may not be. And you have to be okay with that, but you need to be able to understand that it is your job to make them successful.
Right.
So it
And
goes
there's that
back to
aspect
the
again that you also have to like trust in yourself because somebody trusted you in the ability for you to
hmm
teach. Maybe you aren't the greatest doer. Obviously, you need to be a profession at doing whatever you're teaching at because obviously, how can you teach something if you don't even know how to do it? But
right.
they know that you have the ability to translate words and ideas and thoughts into action.
Yeah, absolutely. And a good way to know, if this is something that you're interested in is try to teach your friend, or like someone you're close with, try to teach them how to tie their shoe.
Yeah.
If you try to teach them how to tie their shoe, because everyone knows how to tie their shoe, try to teach them how you tie your shoes,
Right.
right? If you get very frustrated trying to teach your friend how to tie their shoe like you did, it's probably not good for you. But if you had a good time and you kind of enjoyed trying to help them figure it out,
Right.
then it might be good for you. But if you get easily frustrated by people not quite understanding what you mean, um, it's probably not best for you. Or if it's a my way or the highway, or
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the drum corps level that kind of works, but at the like the high school level, back to the high school level,
Mm-hmm.
um, if you're a my way or the highway, you know, you suck it up and figure it out kind of a person, you're not going to be. I mean, you could be a successful tech in some program, but
Right.
you're going to run into not as many programs as you would like to as a technician, if that's your attitude towards teaching.
Right.
So
And I
you got
think,
to know that about yourself.
again, just going back to high schoolers, they are less mature. I'm not saying they're immature, they're just, their emotions come out more easy. And
Hmm.
so the material, you might be great at teaching the material, but you might want to learn how to teach the material in multiple different ways so that's
Hmm.
consistent in that way. Because some people are visual learners, some people are, uh, or was it audio learners? Some people are learners by just repetition. So I
Instant
think,
learners.
right, really good teachers can sort of identify, if not just outright ask, hey, how do you learn? And so maybe you do like the same, let's say you're a drill instructor and you need to show them, like, let's say you're teaching basics block, because a lot of techs will be teaching basics block. Maybe the first time you go over the instructions on what you're going to do, and then you show them like the mini drill, like you do 2 steps of each thing, and then you tell them it's all 8 counts of each thing. And then also, what was the last one? Maybe you even have it written down in a dot chart so they can see, like, these are your dots for the drill if you need to see it written.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you brought up something really interesting, about teaching drill. If you're a drill technician teaching drill,
Mm,
um, you can absolutely combine multiple learning methods into how you teach. So, and what I mean by that, and probably a lot of people are know where I'm going with this. um, when you teach somebody to march forward, right? So let's use straight leg for an example, right?
right,
You tighten the glute, you put 60% of your weight on the ball of your right foot, and you push forward, right? The good job. You have now pushed 1 foot forward. Now you have to make it look right, right? As you're explaining that, you do the action
right,
and you show them. So now you're doing audio and visual. Um, and as you are completing that, you do the motion a couple of times. You show them how to fix that left leg and have it straight. Have the heel touch with the toe up. Have the hi mom written on the bottom of the shoe.
mm-hmm,
Trick. Um, and then you do repetitions with the group. That also will help your kinesthetic learners.
yeah.
And then as you feel confident that, you move on to the next thing. Um, and again, that's a very high school side of it, because when you're at the drum corps level, it's you did it wrong, fix it, we got to move on.
Right, because you're a professional
So
at that level. It's like
correct,
you are expected to know everything. We're here to put your knowledge to the best of the possibilities that are out there.
correct.
So I guess 2 tips I always have for anybody that ever wants to teach anything is, I know it sounds cheesy and it's almost a cliche, but it works. Is compliment, criticism, compliment.
A
Um,
compliment sandwich.
Yeah, compliment sandwich, because there's always going to be something good to say about somebody doing something. Um,
Absolutely.
I'm sure there are going to be people that are like, I can find a way to critique everybody. I can give a critique cubed sandwich. Um, but
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I cut
I
you
was
off.
going to say, you can always find something to say good about whatever they did, even if it's just like you really tried there. Because you're acknowledging their effort, and even if they're super frustrated and they just aren't getting it, maybe you just need to find somebody else, but at least you can acknowledge their effort. And then the second thing is the chunking technique. You take a big
Hmm.
section, you might run the section, you identify the small parts of that section that need help, you work on that small stuff, you run that small stuff a couple times, and then you chunk it back all together. And
Right.
this is in general, both things, no matter what job, it's always going to work. Like, those techniques will always work with anybody.
Always. Always. And I think that's very important for people to understand that as they move into teaching and um, move into, I mean, really making or breaking if someone continues to do a marching art.
Yeah, that's true.
Because techs, staff members, directors, clinicians, whatever you want to label the people that are running a band program or a ensemble, um, I mean, you are what makes the group who they are.
Hmm.
A lot of people will argue that it's the students that do, but I argue against that because the students will build your cultures. The students will, respond and take a liking to specific individuals. And it may seem like this is, their upbringing, but ultimately it is the staff, the director, the technicians that are making or breaking that in that group.
Right. I will say I think text can make students understand directors a lot more or a lot better because techs are the ones that are on the field because usually the director is usually in the tower, and if not in the tower then they're just watching basics block from afar and they're
Time
giving
for
like
our daily
big,
cat visit.
yeah, they're giving big picture ideas and they're saying, hey, these are the things we want to work on, and it's sort of up to the techs to like carry out that vision, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so like if you have great texts, usually the students are like, okay, yeah, the band director is sort of a hard ass, but the texts are getting his message through. And because the texts are able to execute the director's vision, the director is, if not the word happy, he is content with what the band is
Right.
producing. And so that might convince more people to be like, yeah, I want to stay because it is challenging and people are happy. But if you have like a director, and I think these are the worst. This is like the worst example that can happen in programs. But if you have a lackadaisical director, and like they're just like, yeah, this is a show, this whatever, we'll just get it done on the field, do whatever you want with it, and then you have like uh dictator techs, and they're like, no, you know, we can't trust the director. The director's on their way out. We got to run the program ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
then like you get that,
Undermining.
yeah, you get that real uh what's the word, cognizant dissonance in your head
Mm-hmm.
going from like the director is like really chill but the texts are really hard on you. That can really turn off students from the program really fast.
Absolutely, it's a very delicate balance. Um, and and that goes across all levels. That's not just like a high school, but that is
Right.
a very big, and that's also a. I wouldn't go as far as say it's a problem, but it's a what you described is a pretty common occurrence, I would say, in the upper level corps and things like
Especially
that because
college
they,
marching bands.
yeah, well, because yeah, and in college marching bands because it's like they're at the college level they're there because they have a history a lot of times, and they're like, do not mess with my history or you're
Right.
out of my program.
Right.
Um,
Or it's maybe a band director was there 30, 40 years, they retired, now they hired, and like the school decided, hey, we're going to choose the successor instead of letting the program choose the successor. And
mm-hmm,
then sometimes like the school decides to keep the staff below the director on for whatever reason instead of letting the new director choose their new staff, and then like that can cause real friction because like the staff wants to keep what was working going, but the new director has new ideas, and then that fight happens in front of the students, and you're like, oh boy.
mm-hmm. And then another one is the when uh, a director, like at a core level or a WGI indoor level,
Mm-hmm.
um, where the director, and this is, I'm pretty sure this stands true for several groups, is they are there because they want to win.
Right.
If you are not keeping up with the way that they want to win, you will either get fired or you will fall behind.
Right.
Because at that level, you can also be fired.
Yeah.
Just FYI, if you join a drum corps, you can't get fired out of it.
And then I want to say, I guess another thing that happens a lot is let's say a director leaves and they usually like to take some staff with them, especially if they're like moving down the street to
Yeah.
another school. So I guess how would you tell people to handle that as a tech? Maybe a couple of your friends were invited to go with the director and you weren't, or maybe vice versa. You were invited to go with that director, but some of your tech friends weren't invited from the old school.
And who? I mean, it depends on who I'm speaking with. Is this towards students?
I guess both students and techs.
I would, and if I was the one that got left behind, um, for the program, the way I would explain it would be kind of how we talked about it earlier. Yeah, the band director had individuals that he worked. I say he. I'm sorry, that they
Right.
worked better with, and I didn't fit that. Not to talk bad about them, I just didn't fit what he wanted. They envisioned for that new program.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm here to stay to help this program continue what it was doing last season.
Right.
Is what I would say if it was towards students. Now, if it was for other technicians, um, I would talk about. I mean, honestly, I'd probably say a similar answer.
Yeah.
Hey, they got a specific vision in mind for that new program. I don't fit that vision, so I'm gonna make the best of what I have here and keep this pushing this band forward.
Yeah.
I mean, I
So,
wouldn't take it personally. I don't think anyone should take it personally if a director goes to a school down the street and takes all the staff, but doesn't take you. I wouldn't take it personal.
right.
Happens all the time.
And it definitely happens in the workplace as well. So,
Absolutely, absolutely.
um, again, you're a
You know,
tech, so unless you're really striving to go for those top positions, and obviously there are techs who aspire to be band directors, assistant band
hmm
directors, program directors. But a lot of techs are just like, hey, I love band. I love giving back to the programs that supported me and made me the person who I was today. So you also have to just recognize that that's your level within the hierarchy that you
absolutely. There
chose to
is a
be at.
totem pole.
Yeah.
There is a totem pole. Um,
Well.
but all of it, we've talked a lot about how you get involved, and we talked a lot about the importance of teaching in techs and the importance of technicians in general, staff members, clinicians. I kind of lump them all together because they're all essentially doing the same thing. Some
Mm-hmm.
staff members and clinicians probably have more responsibilities than technicians do,
Can you say
but
clinicians again?
clinicians,
Oh, it was sounding like you were adding an extra vowel in there.
clinicians,
Yeah.
um, probably have more responsibilities. But we can't really speak to those because that's going to vary depending on the band program.
Yeah.
That's so wildly different. I don't think that's a question we can really answer. Um, but overall, to know if teching's right for you, or to know if it's right for a friend, if you're listening to this and they don't, which you should get them on here, um, is if you like talking. So if you're like me, um, if you enjoy helping people solve problems, and you are very good at your time management.
And I think a big
Those are
one.
probably my top three uh, uh, biggest requirements. If I was going to hire a tech, those would
Mhm.
probably be my three biggest requirements.
And I think personally for me, I'd love to see that passion of somebody being excited for other people's growth.
Absolutely,
Because that
you like
is
helping solve. Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Because that is definitely a skill that you learn as you get more mature as a person.
hmm
Obviously, you should always look out for yourself, number one. But again, as a tech, you are not only putting yourself forward professionally, but you're also trying to help other people in the program grow as people as well. So
Absolutely.
you get a give and take in that situation.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of benefit to teching. You learn a lot as you're teaching, as you said. And I think it's a worthwhile investment of your time. However, you're going to be busy. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a job. Um, so I wouldn't have high expectations that you're going to be a tech and have a bunch of free time.
yeah.
Um,
Well, also
so
depends on what job you take as well. Some techs just only want to be band camp, some want to be for the entire season.
full
So
season.
yeah, know
Yeah.
your limits.
Know your limits and keep those three things that I mentioned in mind. And if you're interested in being a tech, um, You can also always reach out to us.
Yeah,
Happy to answer any questions.
right.
Um,
I wasn't necessarily a tech, but I
I'm
definitely
happy to answer
networked
the question.
with a ton of music majors because again, I was in college marching band. I was in one of them leadership and also in some other groups that were out to just be in a community of band people and just musicians. So, um, and again, Harrison has probably been teching ever since he left high school. So even up to this day, he's probably still teching. So he definitely has first world experience at that.
I not this year. I didn't
Okay.
this year.
Well, knock on wood, somebody
Um,
might drag you out. But
it would be fun though.
yeah,
Um, last thing on here, and I think we've beat it to a dead horse, but I'll
yeah.
just kind of talk a little bit more about it. Is how to carry yourself as a tech.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing is if you really target the professional distance between you and your student, or you and your section, or insert distance,
Right.
um, it will kind of follow itself.
Yeah.
You don't want to be avoidant. You don't
No.
want to be distant, but you don't want to be. You don't want to know what they had for dinner last week.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you can. I mean, that was a bad example, but hopefully you catch my drift on here.
Yeah.
You don't want to know what their
Everything about
boyfriend said
their
to them
yes.
last week.
And I think as
um,
a tech, if you're first starting out as a tech, you get to learn how to interact with adults as well.
mm-hmm.
The what you can and can't say to, because what you can and can't say to your friends in high school is much different from what you can and can't say to your coworkers essentially at this point. So,
Right.
you will definitely learn how to carry yourself really quick as an adult.
Yeah, and also you'll learn a really important thing. Some people call it a customer service voice,
Yeah.
but other people call it an alter ego. Um, a lot of technicians, directors, clinicians, you know, they will have a very different way that they act in front of students
Yeah.
than they will when they're not around the students.
And you also,
Um,
the really good technicians, they had an absolute trash day. They look like they're maybe not hungover, but they're exhausted.
mhm.
Um, they're
I mean, they might be hungover.
right. They might not be as well dressed as they usually are, but they still show up and they give you their 100% because, again, that's what they're getting paid to do is giving their best to make sure that you get your best out of yourself.
Absolutely, and this goes to a comment I said in our last episode. If you give 150% as a technician, as a leader, um, you will get like 65, 70% back.
Right.
So the more you sell it, it becomes true to some aspect about fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Um, you get to see that happen real time. If you're a new technician, you get to see professionals who are out in the field talking, that got to talk to parents or talk to students, about issues, bring up these issues, X, Y, Z, you got to get blah, blah, yada, yada, yada. And
Mm-hmm.
then you turn around and they come out and they're just like, I'm so overwhelmed. But you have no idea because
Yeah.
they don't show that because the more this will be a weird statement, but it makes sense, I think. Is if you show weakness,
They will run with it.
people will pick up on it.
Yeah.
So a lot of good things to learn about being a tech, and I think it's definitely worthwhile if anyone's interested.
Well, I think we have covered the gamut of teching. I'm actually surprised with how much we were able to talk about teching, truth be told. But thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Marching Arts Podcast. You can find us on all the socials, on the socials at the Marching Arts Pod. That's POD. And thanks again for listening to us today.